Okay, we are back, and you and I took a couple weeks to kind of do life on our own, and now we have found our way back to teaching music tomorrow. And we started this podcast because you and I end up talking a lot about teaching ideas and overall frameworks. And you and I have this kind of dance that we do of, are we going to have a conversation about overarching frameworks that you can apply in a lot of different teaching situations? Or are we going to have like very concrete, actionable teaching sequences that people can actually implement tomorrow? And so this podcast is a result of that kind of dance that you and I do of like, are we talking about the philosophy or are we talking about the actual doings of music? So one of the doings that we are talking about today is reading activities, specifically reading for rhythm. And you've done a lot of work around this area. So talk to me about what's going on inside your brain when it comes to reading activities.
Well, as have you, right? Like, I think this is sort of the place where if someone was thrown into the music classroom to teach without ever having any experience of what elementary music or music looks like, and they just happen to know how to read music, like we all kind of fall into this like comfort zone of like, it's time to read some rhythms, right? And like busting out the rhythm cards and like, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to teach by rote, and all of that good stuff. So for me, rhythmic reading or any kind of reading in general can kind of operate in two different ways. And the first is with formal notation, and the other is without formal notation, right? So if we think about the arc of how we teach musical concepts in the classroom, we have this whole like exploratory without notation phase that we go through. And one of the things that we do during that exploration phase is we're doing this aural visual kinesthetic stuff. So the visual piece is iconic notation most often, and that's most readily what happens right before we say, this is what a quarter note is, here's what it looks like, and now let's do everything with all that understanding and move forth with quarter note. So on the pre-literacy side, we have the iconic notation, which is a form of literacy, but we don't need to split semantics there. And then we have formal notation as well. So reading is really anything for me that visually kind of stimulates that understanding of how sound works and is communicated, right? So if kids can look at, a pair of sneakers and know that that's two sounds on a beat versus one and know that it's one sound on a beat, that's still reading rhythm, right? It's not necessarily always knowing like ta, ta, ti, ti, ta, or ta, 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 ti, ta, or whatever it may be. But it's just understanding that visual representation of the sound. Does that sound about where you are too, or?
Oh, goodness, yes. Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes I like what you said about if someone were to say, like, yeah, I'm a music teacher, what we think that looks like most of the time is students looking at standardized Western notation on the board and reading with rhythmic syllables or with metric counting or something like that. And you described that as the comfort zone. And I completely agree that because there is like an objective right or wrong, that becomes a very natural starting place for a lot of us. But what you are describing is that there are actually many different pathways that we could use to get to the point where students are reading standardized Western notation. And then even after that, what we'll talk about, I'm sure, is like, it's not just like the teacher puts up a rhythm on the board and students regurgitate it and then we move on and we're done with quarter notes, right? Like there's so many other pathways that we can use inside just this umbrella of reading.
Right. And if you think about all of the different ways that we create music in our classrooms, like this is pretty low in a way. I want to be
Yep.
careful how I say this, but kind of a low level, understanding or
Like
assessment
depth of knowledge.
of
Yeah.
things. Yeah. So, reading rhythms is important. Like having that musical literacy is important, and understanding things and being able to create sound based off of visual representation is important, right? For music to keep going and all that good stuff. But again, it's just sort of the beginning. So today, I think the things that we're talking about are definitely things that can be quickly implemented because it is sort of that beginning piece to all of the other different types of music making that we do inside of our classrooms.
Yeah.
So yeah, and like to your point, it's not just about like throwing up a rhythm on the board. It's trying to find, that can be effective. Like kids love to read rhythms off of a rhythm card in unison. Like that's great.
Yep.
But also like there's different ways that you can incorporate it with small groups or individually, or ways to sort of challenge their brains to read and remember in different ways. And all of that is really great practice to kind of, tweak your brain in different ways as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Cool.
so you have a couple things that I think might be good to kick us off.
Okay, cool. I'm going to share my screen for the first time ever. Except you disabled screen sharing, so I'm not. Because you're hosting this meeting. There we go. Now I can do it. Yeah, so this is my friendly Clever Caterpillar. So you may have heard of Sneaky Snake. So this is like the Ann version of Clever Caterpillar. And what this really is a rhythm erase. So if students have learned, this is just a ta and tt. I'm just going real basic using stick notation. If students have learned what these different notes are, how to say them in your classroom with whatever rhythm syllables you might use, this is a great fun way to practice just that reading fluency and remembering and memorization. So the way that it looks, if you're watching on our YouTube or on our video, you can see, I'll just go ahead and fast forward here through the slides. But for those of you who are just listening, what I have here on the screen are 4 caterpillars with 4 segments each, in each segment, each circle is a beat per segment. So each of these caterpillars is 4 beats long. And I have a pattern of orange, purple, orange, blue. So it's going to be an A-B form. And so let's just read it together. V, are we going to use Takadimi?
We can use.
Are we going to use Chave?
You can use Chave. That's fine.
Okay. All right, cool.
So your rodeo. In a second, we'll flip to Takadimi.
Then we'll switch it. Cool.
That's right.
All right.
Okay.
Ready, set, and here we go. Ta, ta, ti, ti, ta. Ti, 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 ta, ta. Ta, ta, ti, ti, ta. Ti, 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 ta. Yeah, great. So we were in canon from my ears, but that's cool. I'm sure it was accurate when I was listening. And then as I go to the next slide, and if I was actually playing the PowerPoint here, I'd have some cool disappearing stuff. One of the rhythms has disappeared. It just so happens that it happens to be the repeated one, right? So we get a little bit of a warm up, and we read as if the rhythms were still there. So let's do it again. Ready, set, and here we go. Ta, ta, ti, ti, ta. Ti, 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 ta, ta. Ta, ta, ti, ti, ta. Ti, 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 ta. Yeah, and then as we go through, the next one's going to disappear, and we have to remember it, even if it's not there. And the kids are like, oh, no. And then we read it as if it was there, going all the way to the end when all of the rhythms have disappeared, right? So then all they have is that visual prompt with the color of the caterpillar, and then remembering those patterns. And it's a really, really fun game. Kids get excited. Every once in a while, I'll ask like one kid to pop up and be ready to do it on their own as like an extra challenge. It's a great way to kind of do that steady beat assessment, that understanding of like just, again, it's kind of an initial music making assessment for these rhythms, but a good way to kind of see where your kids are and if they're ready to go to that next step. So I have a bunch of these available with lots of different rhythms and different forms too. So like you can see this one is orange, blue, purple. So it's A, B, C, and then going through. There's always a repeated one, and the repeated one always leaves first. Right. So it's a good visual representation as well, because like the circles are basically the beat blanks. Everything's spatially there. And yeah, so just a real simple but fun way to practice rhythm reading and remembering and memorization.
Okay, let me ask you about this. So one of the things that's fun about reading, and that's why I said like it can go so many different directions, like what is reading practice and what is memory practice, and what is like students write the rhythm everybody else reads when we're getting into writing and everything like that. So talk to me about, this is like a drag and drop activity that I could use with any ta TT song. So what's your thought if I'm going to do this tomorrow in terms of new material versus unknown material, like known patterns from a song versus new patterns that I haven't seen yet? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you're asking, just to clarify, so you're asking, like, should you only be using ones that people know, like the patterns, 4-beat patterns? Yeah, for me, this is kind of in that practice or like extension phase, right? So I think it's a nice opportunity to do something new. It's also a good opportunity to use as a transition point to a new unknown song with those rhythms, right? Like if you've kind of saved one ta and tt song, and it just so happens like the pattern that they read is let's see if I can do this, ta ta ti ti ta ti 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 ta ti 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 ta 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 ti ti ta b bum. Yeah. So you can do that type of thing. I don't think it matters so much that like it comes directly from a song. I think it can be more random than that.
Mm-hmm.
I say that especially because if you are going to do this tomorrow, you don't need to have this presentation. You can draw a head of a caterpillar
Yeah.
with like an antennae, and then like just have like your 4 beat blanks, and then switch out, leave the heads there, and then switch them out, use different expo markers or whatever, and you can throw things up on the board really quick, or just cover them with pieces of paper, however you want to do it, right? There's lots of different ways to do it. So I don't think that is important. Your point about kind of this idea of like writing and then reading and then memorization, all of those for me, I kind of lump them together in this like identify, read, and write. And the identify is like that translation piece, right? So we're going from iconic to the formal. So you have identify, read, and write. And all of those feel like very almost one and the same. And then the memorization is like your first taste of leveling up, right?
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, I wanted you to be able to talk about that if you wanted to, because I know that you sequence through your extension phase. Like that's something that you think about. So I just want to make sure that you've talked about, whatever as much of that as you want to here in this context.
No, and I think that this is a great opportunity too to get into some of that like student choice stuff, right? So if you decided you wanted to have like a bunch of orange caterpillars, a bunch of blue caterpillars, a bunch of purple caterpillars printed out, then the kids could rearrange them and create their own. I actually have that. I have like their own little like flip book. They can create their own clever caterpillar too, and then do it with a partner. So that's included like in this set, and that's my like first graders went nuts for that, right? And then they have it and they can play it on the playground, and it's like a big hit, and everybody learns Tan-Ti-Ti till the cows come home, right? So I think that all of that is an important piece of that, because it's the first taste of getting into some actual organic music making for the kids, and tied to this notation, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Love it. Yeah, I like how drag and drop it is, and even if it's not. Oh, by the way, Anne, this is something that we can purchase from you.
Yeah, it's in my, oh my gosh, I can't even, it's in my Teachers Pay Teacher store. The stuff that's in there has not been updated, but what I just showed, I mean, it's still great. It's just not, it's been a few years since I've gone in and like refreshed things, but there's still things that I use.
You're saying like,
yeah, it's there.
The graphics are vintage.
Yeah, you can go.
But the actual materials themselves are still good. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no, it's still good teaching. It's just like, oh wow, this is like vintage anacrusic style. No, yeah, if you go into, you can click either through my website or on Teachers Pay Teachers, and it's Clever Caterpillar, and there's 3 sets. They're all rhythm, and they all include like that flip book that the kids can make too.
Love it. Super cute. Okay, well, and you can link that in the show notes too, yes?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, that'd be good. Okay, well, I have something very similar. We can think about this as like the leveled up version. And this one is tied to repertoire. So if you're doing this tomorrow, you can start with the game and then transition, whenever you're ready, into the reading activity. Anne, will you hold your fingers out like this? Okay. And you just hold them there. Don't move them until the very end. And one of your fingers is going to be out. Okay, so I am pointing to your fingers. Pin Jarabin, la gallina culeca pasa por aquí, convidando a sus amos y menos a mí. Cuchara, salero, esconde tu dedo. Your thumb, Anne, is out. Good. That last phrase was esconde tu dedo, hide your finger, and that's the one who is out. So then we go back around again. Pin Jarabin, la gallina culeca. Paso por aquí. Okay, you get the idea. Thank you. You may put your hand out. In the classroom, we're going to not have fingers, even though it does say esconde tu dedo, hide your finger. We'll have just hands out, and we'll go around and do a counting out rhyme with everybody's hand on the floor in the middle of the circle. Because if you do by fingers, that takes absolutely forever. So that's an adaptation. It's not authentic. So this is the first phrase, Pin Jarabin. Those are just vocables. And then la gallina culeca pasa por aquí. The hen was walking past us. And then it's in the same way that so many children's rhymes have words that you're like, that doesn't make sense. It is spoon, cuchara, and then salt shaker, hide your finger. So that goes in the vein of like, we have a collection of text that does not make sense, but it does make sense to facilitate the game. So that's the idea with this rhyme. Okay, so now let me share my screen.
Yes.
Okay, so we have some different collections of rhythms. I have paso por aquí, so the hen was passing by here. You're out Esconde, that comes from esconde tu dedo, hide your finger. La gallina, that's the hen, and cluck. So we can do all sorts of different combinations of these, of students just grabbing these and pulling them down. So here we would have paso por aquí, you're out. Paso por aquí, you're out. And this gets into kind of like, is it reading? Is it writing? Is it arranging? Like it's all of that and more, right? So it depends on how we use this activity, but it's a very versatile idea of just combining things in different combinations. Okay, so kind of similar, Anne, to what you were doing with your caterpillar. Now let's move to this. So I have a rhythm grid that I took from these building blocks in the previous slide. And let's go through and decide that our hen was moving from left to right just on the top line. And are you good to read this? We'll switch to Takadimi.
Yes, it's great.
Okay, let's do just the top line. We'll stop it. You're out. Ready, go. Takadimi ta, takadimi ta, takadimi ta, ta, ta. Good. And just like with your activity, you and I are in canon, which is another way that you could do something like this, right? So if we go through the whole way as a class, we do the whole thing in unison, this line, and then start over with this line, then start over with this line, and then we're at the last line. That's one way to do it. But with the idea of reading being kind of the launch pad for a lot of other different options, we can also do this in a 4-beat round. So you would wait, we're not going to do it here, but in the classroom, one half of the room or the teacher and the rest of the class, however you want to divide it up, but you wait until one half of the room gets right here, and then the rest of the class starts 4 beats. They start at the beginning, 4 beats later. So that's one option, kind of getting into part work. The way this is formatted in the Takadimi concept plan for older beginners is, let's decide, Anne, would you like your hen to pass by on the top line, the second line, the third line, or the fourth line?
The third line.
The third line. Great. So if your hen starts right here and my hen starts, I'll do the first line again, in the top line, then we will get to the last card at the same time. So that's kind of our check, because all of these end with the same rhythms. That will be, even if we're all doing something different, we'll all get to your out at the very end, and that'll be our kind of check. So let's do this on rhythm syllables, and you're going to do this third line. I'm going to do the top line, and our beat will not be perhaps exactly the same. We'll do our very best, but we have a lag going on. Okay, so you have the third line, I have the top line. Ready, go. Takadimi ta, takadimi ta, takadimi ta, ta, ta. Yay, I'm sure we did it.
We did.
Okay, so that's our hen passing this way. If I wanted our hen to pass down, top to bottom in this second column, we could do that as well. One, are you ready to read on rhythm syllables?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Takadimi ta, ta, takadimi ta, takadimi ta. Great. Well, can I tell you something? This time, the hen passed diagonal. So we started this one, then this one, then this one, then this one. Are you ready? Okay, here we go. Takadimi ta, 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 ta. Very nice. So then the next iteration of this would be you and your shoulder partner, or you and a group of 3. Just depends on, again, how you want to slice and dice this. You choose how your hen is going to move. So you might choose to go left to right. You might choose to go right to left. You could choose to go up and down. You could go down, then up. You have to choose which way you're going to kind of move it. You could go side to side, lots of different options here. So this is another one where, it's not my share, where you can slice and dice it in a lot of different ways to kind of gauge the level of interdependence that students are ready for. And it's, again, what we were saying, like it's removed from the teacher put something on the board and everyone speaks it in unison. There's some element of student choice. It's appropriate for whatever students are ready for. Like I said, like people will not everyone will be ready just with their partner choose what pathway their hen is walking. And if that's not what students are ready for, then you don't do it. You, as the teacher, would say, this half of the room is going down. I am going left to right, and you kind of slice it that way, and then different levels of interdependence just as students are ready.
Yeah. You know what I love about this from like a teacher's perspective, just like a planning perspective, is there's so much you could do. Like this would be not that you need to fill, not that we're looking for filling time, but if you're looking for like lots of different ways to extend and to give the kids a choice as to like which direction they're going to go, just even just beginning with like pulling down the different rhythm combinations, right? That could
Yes.
be lesson 1. Then lesson 2 is like just doing the grid, maybe covering them up in like a memory kind of thing. And then the next time you do it as a class and decide which way you're going to go. And then the next time you get into partners, and then maybe the next time you grab some tabanos, like there's always this opportunity for more different ways to come at it, to make it feel fresh, even though you're maybe just doing some extra practice for those kids who need it. So I really, really appreciate that about it.
It's definitely like a prepare one thing, or like prepare one set of cards and then just recycle over and over. Yeah, for sure.
100%.
For sure.
And you said this is in the planning binder. Did you say it's something for older beginners?
Yeah, this is older beginners, Takadimi for older beginners.
Yeah, that's great. That's so fun. And I love too how it was such a beautiful transition. Beautiful transition from the passing game and then talking about how the hen is passing through different ways too. So that's fun too. I loved it. And again, even if we're not using the exact same repertoire that you were using, inspiration can come from lots of different places, right? Lots of different songs, maybe a song that folks are already using in their classroom that they can break down into building blocks the same way. Again, just write it on the whiteboard, have people play around with different combinations of speech, extended instruments. There's lots of different ways to read, and it's not always just rhythm cards. And I think that is the big takeaway.
Yeah, so lots of different ways to represent sound in a visual way, not just standardized Western notation, not just rhythm cards, but even if you are doing standardized Western notation with rhythm cards, because ironically for all of our talk about it's not just standardized Western notation, we both did the same. But even if you are doing standardized Western notation with rhythm cards, there's a lot that you could get into with kind of these mental jumping jacks that we're asking students to kind of perform at different levels of knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely.